Yes, hello, Sean. So, well, let's start. It's 1 minute past, and just a quick introduction. Not going to waste your time because we do introductions in every video of ours. But if you haven't been on this channel, so I am Alexander Golev. I'm the CEO of the project called SAMexpert, which includes now multiple companies working under the same brand. I used to have a company called QCS back in my previous life. Then I had a bit of like 5, 6, 7 years break. I worked for a company in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, it's closed now, but that's not the reason. I just decided to go wild again. And I've been in this for more than 20 years. And working with Microsoft, working on behalf of Microsoft sometimes. And at some point, that relationship didn't stand because, you know what, I'd rather help my customers. So this is what I do. SAMexpert is licensing consultancy. Microsoft is the main area, but we can pick up basically any vendor, whatever may come to your mind. Daryl,
okay, so I'm a guest on Alex's show. I've become a resident guest because he keeps inviting me back, and I'm enjoying myself so much. Again, always thank you, Alex, for inviting me. It's always fun. A quick bio. So I used to run a software asset management company. I was the founder and CEO of Emerset for over 15 years. Sold the company, moved on, went independent again. Today, I am mainly, my main passion is negotiations. So I consult as well, very much like Alex. I roll up my sleeves and I get my hands dirty. So I practice what I teach. I'm a lecturer and I'm a trainer. All things negotiation wise, and of course I've been around Microsoft since 1998.
1998. I do remember that better than you do, Daryl.
1998. So yeah, I've been around Microsoft for many years. One of the first licensing specialists for Microsoft at Microsoft, 20 years plus. So I've got a bit of history, and I'm here to support you. There are you guys and you ladies. You can also approach me. I've got a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and I'm just here to share. So let's have fun, Alex.
Yeah. So what's going to happen today is I'm going to talk the majority of the time. I'm going to talk about how you optimize licensing. But Daryl is here to control my presentation flow and to ask me business level questions. So Alex, it's all fine. But what's the benefit for business? So let's do that. Why not? Exactly. So a quick reminder. It's quite scary actually. I will admit that. We have more than 6,000 people, and what was amazing is the jump from the last Friday where we only had 5,000. Now it's this morning it was 6,200 people. There's going to be free training, same channel, same place, same time, by the way, starting on the 4th of August.
That's crazy, Alex.
Sorry?
That's crazy. The number of people.
Yeah, and with a conversion rate of about 20% from registered people on LinkedIn, I'm expecting about 1,200 people, at least 1,000 people, to actually join the first session, which will be Microsoft Licensing Basics. SQL Server, by the way, SQL Server, the licensing of SQL Server will be covered either on this in the second or third part of the training. So it's going to be either 18th of August or beginning of September. I think it's 1st of September, actually. So if you want to learn the basics of SQL Server licensing, please come to the training. And well, it's an 8-part training, and we're going to end with Microsoft negotiations, which is Daryl's area, by the way. So going back to the topic of today's live, SQL Server cost optimization. So I put the slide together in 2013, and then I looked at it today, and I only changed a couple of bits. This is how crazy SQL Server licensing is. So you have lots of sources where you can buy it from. You can have various deployment scenarios. You can have various licensing scenarios. There are metrics, and don't discount processes, because there are companies. As I said, I told you, I'm a practical person. So when they tell me, oh, it's only about core licensing these days. No, it's not. No, it's not. 50% of the skills I deal with still run on processor licenses. End of life, Only applies to products.
Not and what about Cal plus server licenses? That's still very much alive.
It's still there. Yes, that is. I didn't put it here. Users, devices, multiplexing, all that. Yeah. That's what I meant. And also, there are various ways to just basically cut costs, and many are not just aware. Many are just really not aware. We have a few people joining. I'll just put the hellos on screen. Hello, Akshay. Hello, Jason. Hi, Jason. Nice to have you here. Vinayak. Hello. So, and by the way, have your questions ready. The best question will get Daryl. I don't know so we had a vote on the channel, on the community tab. So people, and I offered various takeaways. So up to the beginning of this live, the most voted for option for a giveaway was a copy of Daryl's book, Negotiating with Microsoft. So we decided with Daryl just before this live, a few minutes before, that's what we're going to give away to the author of the best question today. And we're going to choose we're going to choose the winner during the live in the very end. So if you want a chance to see that, if you want or not, please stay. So Daryl has a few copies still.
Yeah, I'm running out of copies. Not many left.
And we're not making this up. This is not like a scarcity. There's a popular market bullshit.
I'm looking for them on my shelf. I've got like 6 or 7 copies left. It was a very limited edition that I printed 6 or 7 years ago. So
hi, Robin.
Happy to give one away.
So free usages and benefits of free editions. SQL Server Express is free. I hope you're aware. Again, when I put this slide together in 2013, SQL Server Developer was still paid. It was dirt cheap, but it was still a paid license. Nowadays, SQL Server Developer is free. So that's another free edition. Cold backup, that's a difficult one. So I'm gonna touch on it too much today. Mid-August, gonna touch on cold backup. Hot reserves, standby, disaster recovery copies. Now from SQL 2019, we can have 2. One for high availability, the other one for disaster recovery. Another free benefit. Classroom, if you have an enterprise agreement and if you want to learn how to use SQL Server, you can deploy up to 20 copies. That's through enterprise agreement. That's another thing we shouldn't forget about. If we have a learning facility to train to use Microsoft products, that's the caveat. Train to use Microsoft products. You can deploy up to 20 instances, not even cores, instances. And demonstrations, well, developer edition, I should probably change that bit, but doesn't matter. It's good enough for this for today's presentation. What I wanted to take out of this is there's always an opportunity to cut SQL Server costs. Always. There's always something that's been forgotten about, that wasn't looked at due to lack of knowledge, due to lack of time in many cases. And so the worst ROI, return on investment, that we had from a project of SQL Server optimization was 1 to 4. So customer paid 100K for a very large project. That included my costs, plus cost of external labor to shift things around, plus costs of additional hardware. And they saved 400K in the first year. So that's ROI. That's ROI achieved in the first year. So there's always something. So how today we're going to talk about the process, and what I model this process on is just a couple of projects, both in the banking sector. But if there's going to be something along the way which I will remember from retail or anywhere else, I like bringing banking sector in because they have too many databases, in my opinion. Sometimes just they don't really need that many, but this is the case. Banks, they have lots of compliance, money, trading, whatnot, and yeah, they need database. So and a bank was my first customer back like 10 years ago, where I optimized my first SQL Server estate, and that actually achieved £2 million saving. So,
Alex, can I just ask a question? When you look at SQL Server, I'm looking at it from a business perspective. Okay, let's just put 1 second aside the technical side of the process that you're going to get into. If you're looking at the overall piece of the pie. If you're looking at the 100% Microsoft expense pie, and you take SQL Server, a rough estimation, how much is that of the overall pie?
It's not much, actually. If you deduct 50, I would say 15%, 10 to 15%.
That's not that. That's quite a big sum. So if you look at a large organization that's paying $4 or $5 million a year on a multi-year contract, and you're looking at 10, 15%, you're looking at anywhere between $500,000 to $650,000 on database licensing. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes. And the thing also about the data center side is that even in my business right now, 95% of all the engagements are all about, let's only talk about Office 365. It's fine. Good opportunity to save. Customers themselves, they just reject, don't touch the data center. We're migrating to Azure. We're doing this, we're doing that. So I usually
that's a mistake. That's a mistake. Yes. I've heard that. I've heard that when the cloud started a few years ago. And slowly but surely, what I'm hearing from colleagues that I speak to and peers that I'm in contact with and organizations is that everybody's neglecting the data center from a licensing perspective, because everybody's focused on 365. And when you need to cut costs, because costs are going up, overall expenditure is going up. And if you want to start keeping down, then you need to start looking at other areas. And one of the big areas, I think, to my opinion, is SQL Server. And that's something that if it's been neglected for the last 3, 4, 5 years because of priorities, this is actually a really good time to reinvest in that, in the process that you're going to walk through.
I totally agree with you, especially with the last bit. That has been neglected for quite a long time. So the things have piled up. Things have accumulated. It's a snowball. And think about the data center and SQL Server also is do not just limit yourselves to licensing costs, just the licensing costs. Because when you start optimizing data centers, suddenly what then appears is that you're paying for the hardware you don't need. You're paying for support of that hardware you don't need. You'll have a bit of pushback from your outsourcers, which usually charge you per item they support or a server they support. Electricity costs. Just other support costs, calling, data center space. The example I always bring up in all the lives. So once I pointed my customers that they can save on the data center side, they can save £1 million. British pounds, because that was a UK-based public entity, by the way. What they also looked at is other costs, which I didn't look at. And they calculated that they can also save collateral costs of 1.5 million. So 1.5 times more savings achieved in something else based on what we discovered when we optimized data center estate. So there's always something. There's the
indirect cost that I think that I totally agree, because when you look at many times when you look at the cost of doing a optimization project and then the savings of the optimization project on the data center side, people always take into account the direct savings. Now that's, of course, that's obvious, but it's everything around it that comes from that savings that's not taken into account. And I totally agree. It's at least 1.5, if not sometimes a double in savings. Everything else that comes around that. So I think you need to understand that. And when you look at a project, or when you, if you are internal IT or DBA or software asset manager or IT manager, and you're presenting this opportunity to your to the decision makers, don't only talk about the direct cost savings, but talk about the indirect cost savings as well. And that potentially will have a broader effect on getting the approval to go ahead with a project of this type.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot disagree with that. So imagine we've just convinced you, yes, we need to optimize our SQL Server state. When to do it? What's the best time? So the best time is usually one 1 year to 6 months before EA renewal. Why? Because during the enterprise agreement term, you are locked into the quantities, prices, the terms, caveats, special terms, whatnot. But when you renew, you effectively sign a new agreement. So if you are, and the majority of the companies is still on enterprise agreements, in March 2022, the entry barrier will be raised to 2,400 seats. So many of the companies below that number will be looking for alternatives, MPSA, CSP. But right now, the majority of the companies are on enterprise agreements, and especially the enterprises, they will probably stay on AAs. Microsoft is not killing enterprise agreements. So that is the best time. Last year. So in my experience with those two banks, such projects take from 3 to 6 months to complete. It's not like I'm involved 3 to 6 months in that. So usually we do all the preparation stages, and then they take, other people roll up sleeves like me today, and they start moving stuff around and optimizing and, buying licenses, just kick off the process. And thus, by the time when you need to agree with Microsoft your final bill of material, which is about 9 to 6 months, well, actually it happens about 3 months prior to the renewal, you already know what's in your estate. And the earlier you start this, the better negotiating power you're going to get with Microsoft, because one of the most important things when you negotiate your renewal and discounts is for you to be in complete control. If they see, and they see things you don't know they see, if they see that you are running activities optimizing your SQL Server, and by the end, before the renewal, you'll have actually absolutely clear picture and understanding where you want to move to, that empowers you. I don't know if you want to add anything to this, any word.
I totally agree. I think this is a general note on everything to do with how to prepare for a enterprise agreement renewal. I do recommend. We had a session. What was it, about a month ago, on enterprise agreement renewal. So if this is something that's of interest and you are part of this initiative, then just log on to the YouTube channel, SAMexpert, and you can view that session offline, or if you want to approach me directly. Happy to provide more information on that subject.
We have a question from Michael. Hello, please talk about licensing for production versus non-production servers. How this is impacted by which hardware it's installed on, and SQL installations by Visual Studio licenses. Okay, I'm going to touch upon it. There's going to be, I have about 4 minutes per slide, so we have to be quick. This will be covered in the training in August and September, so please come to that training. But I will certainly, this is going to be something that we're going to discuss today. Maybe not in this detail. So let's do this, Michael. I'll cover that, and if there'll be something that I didn't, please ask another question so I can elaborate. So we have a question from Nitendra. So do we need SQL Server license for test development at UT? Yeah, well, we'll get, that's one of my favorites. We'll get to that. Another one. So Akshay, how about licensing inside on SQL licenses for physical socket versus CPU? We get to that. What are the limitations and licensing concepts to use Azure hybrid benefits under CSP? Okay. So
these are excellent questions. I think, Alex, you're covering most of them.
Yes, I am. I can answer this one quickly. So we, under CSP. So Azure hybrid benefit is all right. I wanted to touch on it, by the way. And why I wanted to touch on this, because if you have a large transformation project, then you can run this project anytime, not necessarily before renewal. Because when you move stuff to Azure, say, you lift and shift something in the beginning of the second year of the EA, start optimizing. Because what many companies do, a big mistake, they start paying for full virtual machines in Azure. Whereas you can use the thing that is so-called Azure hybrid benefit, which is essentially a right to take your license. Firstly, you have 180 days of dual running. How good is that? And then when that time, runs out, you can then move your license to Azure entirely. Then you only can use it either in your data center on premises or in Azure. As long as you maintain software assurance, active software assurance, you have that right. So in regards to CSP, this particular question. In regards to CSP, the consideration is do not buy perpetual licenses in CSP if you want to use Azure hybrid benefits. Perpetual licenses do not have Azure hybrid benefits. You may only use AHB through subscription licenses on CSP. That is the consideration you need to remember. Only subscription licenses. And then those subscription licenses, they're even called subscription licenses for Azure. You can use them on premises. If you have persistent instances that you don't shut down each time, you use something, then you shut it down. Persistent instances. Two things about Azure. Two things, not this. Create it as a reserved instance. It's a persistent instance. You're not going to shut it down. Reserved instance saves a lot of costs. Use your own licenses. You don't have enough licenses, go to a CSP provider and buy licenses. I know it's crazy, but that saves you money. Buy licenses through EA, CSP, and PSA, subscription licenses with software assurance or CSP subscriptions, and use them in Azure to save even more. That's the Azure hybrid benefit. So that's one of the considerations. Why this is why on this slide I have this. At any time when there's a big transformation, because the majority of the transformations we're dealing with right now is migrations to Azure. Who would have expected?
Big surprise.
Licensing policy for running SQL VMs on AWS bare metal.
I recommend Alex that you come back to the questions as you move forward. There's a lot of excellent questions that are coming up here. Really, really good, insightful questions. But I think you're going to answer most of them. So let's come back to them. I'll remind you.
I'm going to touch on all of them, but I think it's going to, as I said, it's going to be either 18th of August or 1st of September. There's going to be a training session where these questions will be answered in better detail. So
this is in-depth. This is a lot of in-depth stuff.
Can we license DVD? Yeah. So, okay. I'll try and touch on this, and I've got it covered. So, moving on, because we need to move on. So, we're talking about the process. And I put this slides together, remembering how we run these processes with our customers. So the first thing to do is to understand, why are we doing this in the first place? What are the goals? What are we trying to achieve? Is this a compelling event? Is it something that, we say our enterprise agreement is coming to renewal, or a true-up, annual true-up? And we don't want a true-up license. We don't use. We want to optimize before an annual event. Good idea. Why not? Big transformation. Mm-hmm. That may be a reason. So targets, then budgetary limitations. So do you have a target? Do you want to save? Like you have a target in procurement to save 200K on Microsoft in the next year. That's your budgetary expectation. So that needs to be discussed. We need to be absolutely open, because sometimes there's always an 80-20 rule. Sometimes you can put 20% of effort and achieve 80% of outcome. And by the way, sometimes, almost always works. And then to achieve the rest, you need to actually, get out of your. Anyway, I'm not good with English idioms. You have to work hard. So if we have a specific target, we can work that specific target. But what also is important is to understand who benefits from it. Especially when it's a public sector company. So who's the sponsor? Because these projects, optimization projects, they have too many obstacles. I can tell you straight away, there'll be lots of obstacles. Some of them I'll touch upon, but there'll be something I just either forgot, or it's very customer specific or industry specific. Pushbacks, people giving wrong answers, people being lazy, and you need someone internally. Especially if even if you're an internal software asset management expert in a company, you work for a company, you still need someone, executive or stakeholder, not necessarily the senior level, to support this. So you need to understand why they're doing this. What are the benefits? Who are the sponsors? What do they get out of it? What do they expect out of it, even if they don't tell it? That's very important. So set the goals, understand why you're doing this and for whom.
I want to point out another important point, Alex, and that's regarding to who you bring onto your team. And many times, there's I would almost say a misconception of bringing in sometimes a Microsoft consultant or even a reseller. No, I don't know. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but if somebody at a reseller or at Microsoft has a title of licensing expert or account manager or senior database or whatever, it doesn't mean they know really in-depth SQL Server licensing. SQL Server licensing is very, very unique, and it's got so much history to it that if you get the wrong answer from the wrong person, it's going to be very costly. So you need to be really careful who you bring onto your team, what their qualifications are, what their knowledge, and what their experience is at the end of the day. So I would also take that as an additional point when you're building up your team.
Well, get into your team.
Yeah, thank you.
You need business.
I knew it was coming.
Yes, you need business decision makers, and we're talking about blueprint. This is how the project should run. Then you got your team, and what you should not forget about is you need at least some sort of buy-in, and there'll be a lot of pushback again from DBAs, application owners, support, because you're going to be asking them tough questions, to which we'll get pretty quickly, and outsourcers. So the more outsourcers you have, regardless of what project that is, the higher is the number of outsourcers, the more you depend on them, the earlier you should engage, because they're going to be losing money and they don't like it. So if you want to save, you need to have their buy-in. How are you going to do that? That's always case by case. This is not what this presentation is about. We have a few more questions. I'll just show them on screen, but I'm going to touch on them later in the live. So thank you for these questions. Yep. And hello to Shar. Right. So, and then you need to put together a plan of action. Use this presentation as the blueprint. So just, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It will be different. It's always different, but this particular plan has worked in banking, in retail, in public sector. So this is something this is my blueprint. This is what I do. Right. So first thing you need to do, is you need a baseline. There's no way you can optimize something without knowing what you're optimizing. I mean, there's no argument. I'm not going to argue about this. You need a baseline. Therefore, you need to do certain things. So why? First thing, as I said, you need detailed inventory. You need your battle map, your battleground, where your troops are, where your SQL servers are, what they do. And then you will need to classify them. We'll get to that. And then you need to understand also what your licensing position is. Why? Because you may do a fantastic theoretical exercise. Like in theory we could save, but in practice you're going to be losing on not using your existing licenses, or you may have some risks you're not aware of, which you will need to cover as well. So what you need to do is you need to plan all your optimization activities with having these things in mind. What surplus licenses you have, and what are your current shortfalls. Therefore, a licensing position just for SQL, I'm not saying the entire Microsoft estate, just for SQL, it's easier, but it's imperative. It's imperative. Otherwise, what are you optimizing? So I was in one project when they said, no, we're just going to give you some random data. Let's just discuss theoretical ideas. They achieved nothing. They achieved nothing because, this project just didn't go on because they didn't have enough sponsorship. It didn't have enough vision. So it just failed. So don't forget legacy licenses. I'm going to be touching on that as well.
Alex, when you look at entitlements, how many years back do you take your entitlement from? 5, 10, 20 years?
I still have companies running SQL Server 2000 in my customer list.
So you're talking about 20 years plus. So when you ask for your entitlements from, I don't know, if you have them available or from your Microsoft reseller or from Microsoft or from your reseller, you need to make sure that you're getting your entire history, not just your last DA, not just your last CSP, or I don't know what you're purchasing, MPSA or Select. You need everything.
Microsoft outside of the G7 countries tend to play tricks with Microsoft licensing statements. So thanks for that, Daryl. They tend to just include your last enterprise agreement on that. They specifically hide from you your previous licenses. And I'm open to say that because I know that. I've seen this. I've seen this 2 times. That's enough. It wasn't one. There were 2 times when Microsoft just, in the MLS, only included the recent enterprise agreement. That's bullshit. I know that those customers had previous licenses. Where are they? So insist on having the entire history. Check.
And it's not only that, Alex. It's in addition, you need to take into consideration any mergers or acquisitions. So you need to make sure that when you ask for that entitlement, you provide all the names of all the companies that you've purchased over the last whatever years. You need to make sure you got all the names correct, because they might have various acronyms or different names or different addresses, a whole mess. And when you ask for a Microsoft licensing statement, help me out here, does that include open licenses as well, or is that separate?
It does. It does.
But isn't there something that's not inclusive there?
MPSA.
MPSA. Thank you.
You must ask for
MPSA is not inclusive.
Yeah, you must ask for MPSA. They'll drop one tab on the MLS, but MPSA licenses do not appear on the summary, so you have to count them separately.
And ISV licenses?
Of course not. ISV licenses is something that only your procurement will know about.
OEM licenses?
So which other license?
OEM. If you purchase it, just say you've got an SAP agreement, not an SAP, but you purchase an OEM with some kind of application, it's not going to be on your entitlement, correct?
Correct. And that's very important because, well, I have a specific slide about ISVs, so we'll get to that. So yes, you need to find all the SQL Server licenses. Well, I have a slide about entitlement. Let's get to that, and then I'll answer your questions, funny enough. So notes about the inventory. So do not use a CCM. That's probably going to be the only technical comment in today's presentation. Do not use System Center Configuration Manager and anything that feeds from a CCM. If you have an installation of ServiceNow, not some Pro, ServiceNow that feeds from a CCM, that data, throw it away. If you have Snow that feeds just from a CCM, no Snow agents, throw it away. Same with Flixer, any other tool. SCCM is a rubbish source. You have to tune it, specifically tune it, to return SQL Server editions. I've only seen it once in my career. Hundreds of customers, once. That's to give you perspective. Why? You need editions. You need editions. If your inventory just says SQL Server 2012, SQL Server 2016, SQL Server 2008, that's rubbish inventory. It's bad. You need to know if that's enterprise, express, web, workgroup, data center, standard. That's what you need to know. Because that's the price, not the version. The edition controls your price. The edition controls your licensing rules, mostly. Versions also affect them, but editions control them mostly. This is where you lose complete perspective if you don't have that data. And going back to technical teams with a list of like hundreds of SQL servers saying, "Oh, could you please also comment on what editions there are?" Unfortunately, the percentage of error is too high. If you have 2 running instances, and this happens all the time, 2 running instances on the same server, you can install SQL Server in multiple instances on the same server. We'll get to that. That's a money-saving tip, by the way. So what happens is they just log into one of them, and they give you an edition from that one, and they're forgetting to log into the other one. So you have to be very specific. So there's a free tool. It's still downloadable from Microsoft called Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit, MAP. Run that just on your server estate with all the SQL Server boxes ticked. This is how you get proper SQL Server data. Any other good tool, Flixera, Snow, Aspera, etc., whatever. I'm not selling tools. No, we're not partners with any tools. So I don't really mind. But any other tool that has agents and is able to return SQL Server editions, also you're good tool. Don't use the CCM. Virtualization data is critical always because Microsoft licenses are assigned to hardware. But with a caveat, it's actually not that critical with SQL Server. So if you have a few servers, floating somewhere in the unknown, you may just assume they're virtuals, they're mobile virtuals, they require license with software assurance, and then you can calculate license based on just virtual machines. It's not like that with Windows Server. Not today's topic. Containers can be an issue. So your tools must be able to scan containers. Because containers, what they do, they sandbox software, and not every tool is able to actually find the containers, and then look into the container, and then actually audit the software that's inside the container. Because containers are counted as separate VMs by Microsoft. For SQL Server, each container is a virtual machine, regardless if it is actually a virtual machine or not. So we have Daryl disconnected. So thank you for all the questions. I'll get back to all the questions, I promise you. Just stay with us, and I'll get through all the questions again. Oh, Daryl's back. Hello.
Sorry, I had a glitch, something with my connection. Sorry.
So license position, it's what Daryl was talking about. So get a Microsoft license statement somehow through your Microsoft reseller, Microsoft partner, someone you know, even people from Microsoft. It's not a trigger for an audit. Many people are afraid to say, "Oh, we're not going to ask Microsoft." No, it's not a trigger for an audit because it's actually vice versa. It's actually the opposite. It's when you ask for a Microsoft license statement, actually to Microsoft that means that you're trying to get control of your licenses. Why would they audit you? Because you're trying to already audit yourself. That's a good sign. And do not discard legacy licenses. Something we should really actually put on this slide for future recycling of this presentation. So ISV licenses that came with financial software, storage software, some data management software. In many cases, when you buy third-party Commvault, when you buy third-party software like Commvault, licenses may come with it. So you actually may have SQL Server Enterprise running that. And if you just count it, you're gonna start thinking, "Oh, I need a license for that server." But actually, you already paid for it through the third-party license. Commvault, some VMware products, I think, include SQL Server. I may be wrong, but need to check the license. Usually, that's something related to storage, archiving, finance, accounting, that sort of software, where database is an essential part of that software. So find those licenses. So OEM, SQL as OEM is a rare thing. It used to be sold as OEM. You could just buy an appliance and there'll be SQL pre-installed and you're going to have a sticker on the top or the bottom of the server. If you have those, your IT probably knows about them. Mm-hmm. So if you have those licenses, if it's SQL Server Data Warehouse, that's 90% probability you bought it as an appliance and you have a license that you bought through OEM channel with the server. So that's something also you need to gather.
Alex, I just want to a quick point on the previous slide. For those of you that, for example, Alex mentioned financial applications. So one of the biggest applications that have got a lot of SQL licensing is SAP. So many previous agreements, historical agreements with SAP used to come with SQL Server. So that's something that you should definitely look into. And there are other applications that I know that you might even have missed, like applications from NICE for call center recording, comes with ISV licenses. So those are just two examples, but the essence is there are many times actually hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of SQL Server licenses that won't appear anywhere on your Microsoft licensing statements. And if you don't identify the applications and then go look for the licenses, you'll never find them. It's going to be basically thrown away. So that in itself, just going through that exercise is a big cost savings opportunity.
We get an interesting question. So I'm going to skip through some of them. The last one, can you please lists out some of the prominent third-party applications from which we get SQL licenses along with this purchase. Dear community, what I would suggest doing is we can sit down with Daryl, spend 15 minutes, and just remember all the titles that we can just
you can map them.
Go ahead, put them on this slide. For the next presentation, we could probably recycle it in a few months. We'll put them on the slide just as reminders. We will keep them somewhere on LinkedIn. What I'm suggesting is, on my page on LinkedIn, I will make a post with those names and ask you, if you follow me on LinkedIn, then you'll probably be able to see that post. LinkedIn doesn't show all the posts, so I don't know if there's a way around it. Then I will ask you, the community, to contribute, because there are some titles we've never seen. Yeah. So I remember Convolt. Daniel just remembered Nice. I've never seen it in my life. So this is not something you engage with. And there are some national licenses. So I was born in Russia, and I worked for many years in Russia. There's an accounting package, lots of, by the way, accounting software now by that company called 1C. They all have SQL included. So I know that. Who outside of Russia knows that? So therefore,
another good example, Alex. That's a good. But I just remembered something. For those of you that have point of sale applications or hardware, could be from companies like IBM, Retalix, and others that I might have gone blank. The majority of them come with embedded SQL Server licenses. And in point of sale or retail organizations, could be a fast food chain, could be a supermarket chain, where you have thousands or tens of thousands of point of sales and backend as well that came from the manufacturer. Those usually, not always, usually have embedded SQL Server, and the contracts used to come at least a few years ago, 2-3 years ago. I'm sure they still do. They come with SQL Server licenses. So that is also something. If you're from those industries, have a look at that. You need to know to ask the right questions. So just ask the questions. You don't need to remember all the names of applications, but just ask the questions. If something looks maybe funny or maybe a question mark, don't hesitate.
We have a nice question from Karen here. No question, comment. It's a comment. I've asked resellers to send me monthly MLS for years. That's brutal, but I totally support you. But that's brutal. But we can do that. Resellers, they actually pay for it. So they pay something like $10 each time they generate a new MLS. It's not free. Okay, so moving on. So when you have this inventory, you need to then classify your SQL servers. Cut the pie in pieces. So you have your production instances. You have a dedicated classroom reminding you 20 instances to learn how to use SQL Server. Only for that, don't cheat. Cold backups, very difficult one. So don't ask me today about cold backups. I barely understand that topic myself. Now I'm gonna revisit it for the training, and I'm going to cover it in the training. Development, demonstration, design, testing. So we had a question today about those. You can either use MSDN licenses, which come either with Visual Studio subscriptions, or you can subscribe to MSDN platforms. So I can either use those licenses, and that includes SQL Server, even the smallest subscription, which is called Visual Studio Visual Studio Standard, I think. That contains Windows Server and SQL Server licenses, unlimited number of instances for these four purposes: development, demonstration, design, testing. But what's much better here is you really need to flag all those instances, because I'll get to that. Or it's a big share, always. And in many cases, you do not need those subscriptions, because SQL Server Developer is entirely free. The only string attached there is that everyone who touches it needs to have a free Visual Studio account. That's it. And I don't even know if maybe that requirement is no more there. Need to update myself on that. So IC bundles, third party. So you need to find those, what we just talked about, so accounting software and whatnot. You need to find those, and you need to flag those instances. These came with Convolt. These came with Nice. These came with a call center. This came with something else. You need to flag those. Even if you doubt it, just for the sake of future research, flag them. SQL technology bundles. So Microsoft software comes with built-in SQL Server in many cases. Two major products are System Center. You may only use SQL Server Standard with it. You may not use SQL Server Enterprise. Update me if I'm wrong, but that's always been the case. Standard.
No, that's correct, Alex. That's correct.
And the other one is what is now called Azure DevOps Server. And don't take this wrong. Take it with a pinch of salt. The name, because you can run it on premises. It's a production product. It's not a development product. That's very important. So TFS, Team Foundation Server, or Azure DevOps Server in its current naming, that's a production product. Always, you can't call it dev, but that comes with SQL Server Standard as well, as part of that license. So please remember that. So those are also. So just recently, when was it? 4 months ago, it was a insurance company. 48 SQL servers, the total number of servers. 6 of them discounted because of SQL Server technology. So 6 out of 48, 1/8, 12.5% discounted. They didn't have to buy licenses because the licenses already came with the software. So there you go. That's a good example. So, and this is what I always do. So we have this list of servers, and this is how it looks like, by the way. So this is simplified. It's actually much wider spreadsheet with all the details. But that's the sort of, what is the computer? What's the host for the virtual server? What's the product running? So notice, edition, and version. What's the usage? Production, development, staging, demonstration. Be careful with staging. Microsoft sees staging as production, not development. Staging is production, must be licensed as production. If license came bundled with accounting software or SCCM, and then other licensing nodes you may have. So this is just an example. This is just, by the way, this is taken from a real project, which I did in 2012. I only updated versions today for the sake of making this, more like appealing to the current audience. It used to have SQL Server 2008 and other versions, but it is actually a snippet from a real project.
Alex, can you go back a second? I just want to make a note, just to make sure that I understand and everybody else. The usage data, that is manually entered.
That is declaration. So
that is your declaration. That is the customer's declaration.
So the first 3 columns come from the inventory.
Okay.
The last 3 columns, if you count from left to right, not from right to left, the last 3 columns from left to right are what comes from the team. That's why you need that's why you need to have DBAs on board. That's why you need application owners on board. That's why you need to communicate with various departments, because there's going to be lots of research. It's a detective work.
It takes a lot of time. It takes time and effort. This is not a trivial project. That's important to understand.
You are a detective. Sorry, why did I jump to another? Anyway, now we get to the fun part. Now you have the map. Now you start assessing various scenarios. So firstly, I hope, let me go back to this. I hope you already discounted technology bundles, ISV. You've put development businesses into a separate bucket called backup. You flagged, by the way, something I didn't comment on previously on this slide, passive failover instances, because passive failover instances under certain conditions can be free. If you have a pair of SQL servers, they're exactly the same configuration, they covered with software assurance with the current versions, then the secondary node is free, as long as it's truly passive. It must be truly passive, no cheating, truly passive. No running of reports, no offloading, nothing like that, no scripts, nothing. It must be truly passive. Yeah. Then it's free. So I hope you've flagged all that. I hope you've done this on this spreadsheet. So now, with the rest of the production instances, having passive in mind, because you may need to move them to the same cluster, you start thinking about the biggest option to achieve savings in SQL Server license optimization, which is addition downgrades. Why I'm talking about this? So the average percentage of SQL Server Enterprise, I'm not talking about some crazy customers where they deploy SQL Server Enterprise everywhere, and that's crazy. I have no reason for that. The average percentage across many industries, including insurance, retail, banking, then I remember all the customers I work with, is about 20%. And sometimes even reasonable auditors, there's such a thing in this world, there's reasonable auditors. When they see there are no additions returned, they may assume you only have 20% enterprise. Not everything is SQL Server Enterprise, because that's the industry average. That's the average. The actual demand for enterprise after such exercises is actually about 5% only. So 15% of all the instances are wasted. And SQL Server Enterprise costs 4 times more than SQL Server Standard. This is why it's a money saver. So a few years ago, I don't have access to the current price list. A few years ago, public price list, level A, the highest, anyway, before discounts. 2-core pack for SQL Server Enterprise was about 18,000 pounds. I'm talking British pounds, so that's $20-something thousand. SQL Server Standard, same license, 5,000 pounds, so about $6,000. Do the math.
And why does that happen, Alex? What's the main reason that? Because what you're saying is that don't assume that the edition that's installed is the edition that's needed.
It's in many cases.
That's basically what you're saying. You're saying it might be enterprise, but nobody says it needs to be enterprise. You need to play the devil's advocate and challenge that with your DBA.
So the way I do this, I came up with it in 2013, is for every version. So say there's an estate and it runs SQL Server 2019, 2014, 2008 R2, and 2005. Only these 4 versions. They may run more versions. Usually it could be different. I go to Google and I Google this. Yes, I specifically put a Google screenshot here. SQL Server Edition comparison. Go to the Microsoft website. Don't go to other websites. Go to Microsoft website. They have a page per version of a SQL Server. And then all you need to do is to take those features that are enterprise only, and it's going to be a short checklist. Send it to application owners and DBAs and ask them, which of these features do you use? Don't send them the whole thing. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Don't send them the whole thing. Just send them the enterprise edition features. Obviously, you can then challenge it further and ask, maybe you can run Express on it if it's just a one-off project. You just run some random database. Why did you deploy enterprise? Why did you even deploy standard? Express edition is free.
Yeah.
So do that. So create a checklist. Send those feature checklists just for enterprise editions. It's going to be a short list. And from my memory, if I remember something related to, I think SQL Server 2014, it was data warehousing, advanced encryption, synchronous replication. So very, very few features and something about RAM volumes. But nowadays, SQL Server Standard supports so much RAM, you don't really need enterprise for that. So why this happens? Answering your question. It's very tempting if somebody asks you to deploy a database to deploy the highest edition, just to avoid any questions like, incompatibility, or they needed this. If you're not responsible for licensing, if you work in IT support, if you're not fluent in licensing, what then happens is they ask you to deploy something. Every human person, by nature, we know what they call laziness. Laziness is you're not lazy. It's just your protective mechanism from doing something that you think is futile. So that's how this works. It's human error. The reason for deploying too many enterprise editions is that's just people do not look into what they actually need.
Yeah,
they don't study that. They just deploy enterprise. They have this
challenge. It's really about challenging.
Yeah. So and expect DBA pushbacks. Because every time I ask DBAs, so only maybe 5% of the DBAs collaborate straight away. But when you explain that's about cost savings, that's about your department goals, and we all gonna have very good faces when we're out of this project, and we will tell your bosses you did good job. That sort of thing. So motivate people. You need to motivate people. You need to have soft skills to achieve that. because DBS will going to push back. They're going to say, no, we need enterprise edition. So the only pushback that I accept as valid is if they send me back a spec from a third-party tool vendor or software vendor saying enterprise edition is the only supported edition with this software. What the reason is, I don't know. Maybe they have that particular vendor has some sort of agreement with Microsoft, so they're going to push enterprise edition. They don't bundle it. I don't know. Maybe that's a valid technical reason. I don't know. But if it says enterprise edition to be supported, so for that configuration to be supported, for you to be able to go to that third-party support and ask them why my software is not working, you must run supported editions, and that's a valid excuse. And
what I used to do, what I used to do, Alex, sorry for interrupting, is that if the DBA wasn't cooperating, I would send the total cost of what that enterprise configuration is going to look like compared to potentially moving to standard or some kind of mix. And I would always put a decision maker on the bottom line, somebody that cares about finance. And what happened, what always happened is that people are motivated when they see that you can pay 20,000 or 15,000 instead of 100,000, and that's the norm. Okay, that's the norm when it comes to these configurations. It's huge. Nobody wants to just pay because it's there, and that's a big motivator. Money. Get decision makers involved in the process. You said that when you started the presentation.
Yes, yeah, and actually the money is much scarier. This is just a sec. Let me switch to the next slide. This is a cluster.
Yeah. Okay. Good example.
This is a SQL cluster. It's not that big. 4 nodes. It's a dedicated cluster, by the way. I know I always say dedicate. Dedicate just for various sakes. Just put all the production here. Do not put development here. But you can see this is actually a snapshot from a real project. So obviously, I'm not calling the customer names here. This is a snapshot from a real configuration. Then we were asked, does it make sense to go for unlimited virtualization? So what is unlimited virtualization? I promise not too many technical bits, but I'll explain. Unlimited virtualization is a benefit you get in SQL Server licensing if you assign SQL Server Enterprise. That's the only edition that works with SQL Server Unlimited Virtualization. SQL Server Enterprise to the hardware level, so all those 24x4 cores, to the hardware level, SQL Server Enterprise, with active software assurance, so you also have an OpEx cost running. Each year, you pay software assurance. In that case, you have an ability to run as many SQL Server instances as you want on those cluster nodes. Does it make sense? So SQL Server Enterprise at the hardware level gives you an ability to run as many containers, not any sort of SQL Server, virtualized in this cluster. And I've only seen 1 or 2 cases, I think 2, because that would be unfair for me to say 1 or 2, Alex. No, 2 cases when unlimited virtualization made sense. Unlimited virtualization makes sense when you are heavily virtualized on enterprise. Then also, if you look at these numbers, the caveat I put at the bottom of the slide is each VM runs on 8 virtual cores. The reality is 80% of the VMs will run on 4 virtual cores. So imagine if all these virtual machines will run on 4 virtual cores, then the per VM licensing would cost you $271K, as opposed to almost $1 million for unlimited virtualization. So don't fall for that trap. Calculate. Don't just assume if somebody tells you, oh, it's such a great thing. You just license your hardware level and you run as many VMs as you want. Works for Windows Server, doesn't work for SQL. Please bear that in mind. So sometimes I had a customer where the 90-day rule, you may reassign license every 90 days, and we did an LP every 90 days, so we would reassess each time. We had a customer to whom we one cycle we would advise to go for unlimited virtualization because they would heavily consolidate SQL Server Enterprise on like a 3-node cluster with lots of RAM, 20, 30 VMs per node. And then next month, suddenly everything just falls falls apart because there's a new admin decided to move all the VMs somewhere else. You get what I mean. So then it didn't make sense. In the end, we just decided to stick with per VM licensing because it was just a nightmare to always kind of reassign licenses back and forth. So
Alex, yes. have you seen cases where, for example, a customer went through an exercise like this on a specific cluster or on a specific environment, I don't know, only 12 months ago, and then they come back and the same environment or same cluster, I want to say same cluster, all of a sudden they're doing the audit, they're doing their internal reconciliation, and prices have doubled, tripled on the same server. What could have happened there?
Prices tripled on the same server.
This shouldn't be a trick. I didn't mean it to be a trick question, but where I was going is that I've seen cases where servers have gone through a hardware refresh, and nobody really noticed that when that hardware refresh came into place, the new hardware came with more CPUs, more cores, because that's just the reality. The pricing for hardware is going down, but the number of cores are going up, and basically people, nobody realized that the same configuration that you were paying, I don't know, just say $500,000 for the SQL, now you're paying 1.5 or even 2 million because it went through a hardware refresh and nobody took into consideration the SQL Server capacity or SQL Server costs.
That would not have happened if they licensed it per VM, because then in that case nothing would have changed. So that would have happened if they used unlimited virtualization. That's the reason probably why the costs doubled or tripled.
Yeah.
Because the customer thought that unlimited virtualization is a good idea. That's, by the way, it's always a good idea to reassess each time you do unlimited virtualization, and you think it's going to be always edge somewhere. I've never seen it very, very effective. Never. So it's like, say, unlimited 900, unlimited per VM is 1 million. That's the difference you're going to see. 10%, 15%. That's why it's very easy to tip below. It's very easy to actually go below the threshold. So reassess, change the configuration, reassess. It's good if there's a tool you have, and I don't know any such tools, that would provide you comparison and actually tell you, you know what, we think you would be much better off if you did this. So I don't know such tools. If you know, please let us know. I'm not sure I'm going to advertise it, but just for my sake, it would be really nice to know if there's a tool like this, because many of my customers would have benefited from something like it. So then there's another thing which is underrated, which is heavily underrated, and I think this is something you need to look into: physical clusters. So another third technical thing today: SQL Server. If you run it in boundaries of one operating system, that's why it's physical cluster. It's physical cluster. It's just a machine with one OS, and you run SQL inside that OS. No virtual machines, no containers. Careful, no containers. Containers are virtual machines for the purpose of SQL Server licensing. If you just install multiple instances, and if you don't know, you can actually deploy multiple instances of SQL Server with various escalation orders, configuration options, backup configuration. They're absolutely separate SQL Server instances on the same computer, in the same operating system. You may cover them with one single license, one license. So that's unlimited, actually. And that is the only option on a hardware to have unlimited for SQL Server standard. Not when you virtualize it, there's no such option. When you run multiple instances in one SQL Server, in one Windows Server operating system, all those instances may be covered with just one license of SQL Server standard. Multiple SQL Server standards, one license of SQL Server standard. Just one instance of enterprise, you already need an enterprise edition license. But then again, all the standards and enterprises on the same machine can be covered with that license. Hope it makes sense. So in this case, especially on standard, virtualized configuration could be more expensive. Then again, this is not a made up example, sort of. I try to simplify this. And if your customers are helped in the United Kingdom, they actually benefited from migrating their SQL Server workloads to dedicated clusters when you have an active node and passive node. And passive node, when it's truly passive, because that's just one operating system, it's not multiple VMs, it's free. You just need software assurance. It's free. Maintenance. So the pushback I get from DBAs is like, oh, you know what? When you run a separate database, you can then maintain them separately. Firstly, if it's just maintenance in terms of changing the schema and master database, shut down the instance, or do something with the instance. It's just an instance. You're operating with an instance. It's not different. In regards to the entire thing, in this cluster, you just maintain nodes. You roll out updates. And that's not considered active. You roll out all the updates on the passive node, flip the nodes, roll out the updates on the active. So maintenance is a silly pushback. It's different. It is different. The procedure is different, but it's not much more complicated. There's a comment from Robin, so I will pick this up. So it doesn't give you unlimited virtualization, right? There's a catch. You'll only be able to rebuild to 24 by 4 VMs, so license on physical cost. That's why I said you need licenses with SQL Server, with software assurance, because software assurance gives you unlimited. If you assign just enterprise without software assurance, then actually the formula is different. Not this, not like that. It is truly unlimited. When you have software assurance, it is not unlimited. It's limited to the number of assigned licenses. Then the number of VMs may not be higher than the number of assigned licenses. So let's not go back to that. So, but yes, you can get fully, truly unlimited virtualization with SQL Server Enterprise if licenses that you assign have active software assurance. It's unlimited. Then another thing to consider, which is a big thing. So if you want more ideas, I have a recording here on this channel, which I did in February, which just talks about ideas of SQL Server optimization. There are more ideas. We're talking about the process. So when you've come to almost to the end of the process, the other thing you need to consider, transformations, migrations to Azure. So what you need to remember, Azure hybrid benefit, what you need to remember is you may reuse licenses with active software assurance in Azure, and thus save costs on the Azure VMs. And I'm not just saying you'll get discounted VMs, but then you also need to pay for the license. The discounted VM price and the license price together is still lower than just pay-as-you-go for Azure. So keep that in mind. Don't forget to tick that checkbox that you're using your own licenses. You also need to run some PowerShell script on that machine to tell that you're using your own licenses. I'm not an Azure engineer, by all means. So if I'm wrong, sorry, don't remember exactly what you need to do. But from the licensing standpoint, that's a huge ability, especially the more workloads you move to Azure, to reduce your costs, especially with reserved instances. So when you think, okay, so we're freeing up these licenses, they're useless now, so shall we do this, shall we not? Think also what you're going to do in Azure. What is exactly going to be moved? When? And then plan for it. I even say add subscriptions for Azure. If that's a persistent instance, add subscriptions. Save money. Save. And then the final step. So you've got to this point. You've done various assessments, A/B comparison of scenarios. Then you need to assess other things. So obviously, you may be very optimistic and say, okay, fine. We can save 100K on this project, and then your labor cost to move this all around is more than 100K. Probably doesn't make sense bothering. Or maybe you need to reduce your appetite. Maybe you just need to do quick wins, just something. Hardware and support costs as well. So if you say, your consolidation will require buying new hardware and selling old hardware, that needs to be assessed. That needs to be taken into account because you're assessing the entire project. Maybe you can sneakily just do that as a kind of, push that hardware cost to some other cost center. If you can do that, by all means, why don't you? Don't forget about reserves. So when you assess what you're going to move, as I said, That's why you need to know your surpluses and your shortfalls. You need to also understand, okay, if I consolidate or if I do this, if sometimes actually even downgrade an edition doesn't make sense, because instead of using the license you already have, you would have to buy new licenses. So you need to assess that as well. Does it create new license requirements? Does it throw away existing licenses? That needs to be assessed. The full picture, when you have all these scenarios, when you have all the ideas outlined. And then timing and feasibility. So are we able to achieve this before the renewal? Or will it slip after the renewal? And then plan accordingly, and always be skeptical. Timelines always slip. If somebody tells me it's going to be done in 3 months, what I keep in mind is 9 months. Just multiply by 3. It's a universal formula. And then roll up your sleeves. And first things first, do not leave something into be decommissioned state. It's not an excuse. Are we going to decommission this? Decommission now. It runs, you need a license. It's a silly excuse, sorry. Downgrade as you planned, consolidate, migrate as you planned, and then if you're aiming to optimize your EA renewal, finish that before renewal, so you have all the ducks in a row when you approach the last steps of the Microsoft negotiation. Hopefully, the Microsoft negotiation at the beginning, but usually it doesn't happen like that. So probably somewhere 3 to 6 months before the renewal, you'll have all your ducks in a row, and then you'll get to Microsoft and say, no, we don't need that. We don't need an SE. We don't need server cloud enrollment. It doesn't provide us any benefits. We just need this. We understand that's value, but guys, this is what we need, not what you're trying to sell us. So commercial negotiations. Daryl, I'm a bit tired of presenting. May I please pass this to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to take this, Alex. So basically, when you come to the negotiation table, having everything prepared really puts you in the driver's seat. If you don't know what you have and you don't know what you want, then costs are going to go up. Now, being able to come in with a reduced quantity of your SQL Server licenses actually is a very powerful tool, because what you're saying to Microsoft is, I've done my due diligence. I know what I have. Don't second guess me. And I want to renew this and I want to buy this. Don't go for the obvious, being what you have is what you're going to renew. That's one of the biggest mistakes of not preparing, is that you take your current enterprise agreement, software assurance, CSP, whatever, doesn't matter, that's running on maintenance, software assurance, and you automatically renew it. Now, I can tell you that's never correct. Never correct. Even if a year has gone by, something has changed. Hardware refresh, new applications have come in, new upgrades, Azure migrations, something's happened. And if you don't come prepared, Microsoft will come prepared. And they'll tell you what you need, and they'll tell you what the price is going to be. And if you're moving to Azure, that is a negotiation tipping point. So that is something that I won't say all organizations are doing, but I would say a large majority are migrating to Azure. I'm seeing, when I'm speaking to my contacts and my peers, huge migrations, and it's always got SQL Server. So are you going to be paying double licenses because you've already paid under software assurance and it's still running? And are you going to move to Azure? Are you going to double pay? Is it going to be pay as you go, reserved instances? You need to come with those metrics. You need to come prepared. Potentially you'll be double paying for a while if you don't do that. If you need to maybe migrate to Azure and at the same time ask for a special clause for an early cutoff date for your SQL Server licenses, or if they're going to be running in parallel. All of these things need to be taken into consideration, and you need to work many times with diverse teams within your organization. So there might be specific people that are running your SQL Server instances that are not part of the Azure migration. It might be a very big SAP migration. Is it going to be migrated to SAP? Is it going to be migrated to Microsoft? What's going to happen to the licenses? So all that needs to come into play. And preparation. Ask questions. So one of the key things to do, and Alex had a very good idea, is prepare a checklist. You know, when you take a flight, or when we used to take flights, there was a time before COVID that we used to take flights, at least the majority of us. The first thing that a pilot does, doesn't matter how many hundreds or thousands of flying hours he has a checklist. He sits in the cockpit, and every single takeoff and every single landing, he goes through the checklist. He verifies. So you have to have a checklist. You can't have everything up here and presume that you know that everything is the same or nothing has changed. So if pilots do it on every single flight, doesn't matter how many years or thousands of hours of flight they have, you need to have it as well. So SQL is one aspect of it, and there are various other aspects that Alex has spoken about in previous webinars, and you'll talk about in the future. So take the presentation when you go through it again on YouTube, and actually just make your own checklist and use it again and again and again, and keep on improving. So I think really that summarizes it from my perspective. Commercials are negotiable, especially if you're a big organization. You can definitely negotiate pricing, negotiate discounts, negotiate Azure discounting. Again, I would say everything's up for negotiations, depending on your size, on how mature you are with your preparation. But don't take whatever Microsoft offers. That's always my recommendation.
Thank you, Daryl. I have a scary story here on this slide connected to don't fall victims to one-time concessions. So one of my customers, they many years ago, they agreed. Microsoft basically told them, deploy as many SQL Enterprise. It's a very large customer. Deploy as many SQL Server Enterprises as you want. You can buy them at the price of SQL Server Standard. They were very excited about it. They did everything, unlimited virtualization, SQL Server Enterprise everywhere. Comes a renewal, and then they go back to Microsoft and say, what now? And Microsoft says, what now? Now you pay a software assurance 5 times more than you would have paid on SQL Server Standard. There's no way back. You've deployed it. The costs for that particular bank to redeploy Standard back were prohibitive. Therefore, they ended up paying. It's a trap. So it's a trap. One-time concessions are always a trap. You may achieve quick wins. If your plan is to achieve a quick win and then exit this job and go for another job, do that. But if this is a long term, if you're in C-level, look at that. Microsoft sell you value. Be careful. That's what happens. 3 years pass, and you have to face the reality. This is you take the what was the pill in Matrix in the Matrix, red or blue? I don't remember, but you face the reality. So we've come to the questions. So I'll leave this slide with my contact details on screen, and I'll just quickly run through the questions, which we have plenty of. And I will start with those that we had in the very beginning as well, just to see if we have answered them. So, Michael, please talk about licensing for production versus non-production. So I've covered this. So non-production, another note is I usually tell to separate non-production VMs if you're running virtual machines into a separate non-production cluster. Non-prod, the problem is, in my opinion and in practice, you may mix prod and non-prod on the same service and just pay for prod. But for many, because of the ambiguity, I have a video about it on this channel. Because of the ambiguity of the roles, people still treat them differently, and you may run into an issue with somebody insisting like this. No, you must pay for all the VMs, even if they're non-prod, if that's a production cluster. That's not true, but just to avoid that, keep non-prod separate. The other consideration about non-prod in Visual Studio is that if you run SQL Server Enterprise or SQL Server Standard as non-production, I always say move to developer, because that's an equivalent of SQL Server Enterprise. Move to developer edition. Just move to developer. Because when you run it under MSDN, then what happens? Everyone who has access to that virtual machine, which is admins, backup operators, system center operators, all the IT people that can even remotely, through other layers, touch that virtual machine. They all need MSDN licenses, not just your 2 developers. 100, 200 people in your IT department require MSDN licenses. If that's only for SQL Server development purposes, then in that case, all they need is to basically register on, and to be honest, nobody cares. Nobody cares. They need to register. You just deploy SQL Server Developer that gives you like a complete, just out of jail card, as long as it's only used for non-production tasks. So SQL Server Developer can't suggest it more than I just did. So do we need SQL Server License Development UET? That's what I just said. Hopefully I answered. If I didn't answer your question, please just elaborate further, because I'll get to your question again. Akshay, how about licensing inside for SQL Server licensing physical circuit versus vCPU? So that was that slide with the cluster. You can. I'm going to publish these slides on LinkedIn in the events, on the events page, and maybe in a couple of days on my own page. So just follow me on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, I don't know, leave me a comment on YouTube under this video so I can somehow reach out to you. And then, this is the email address on the screen, ask@SAMexpert.com. Send me an email. What are the limitations and licensing concepts to use Azure Hybrid Benefit under CSP? That's what I said in the beginning. So do not buy perpetual licenses in CSP if you want to use HB, because perpetual licenses do not have, and there's no way to add that to them, do not have software assurance benefits attached. Licensing policy for running SQL VMs on AWS bare metal or VMware Nutanix. Oh, no, I'm not going to answer today. I'm very sorry. So actually, I will take it as a homework. Maybe just, you know what? I'm going to, Daryl, if you could write it down, please, because I'm going to go through questions. Because I think we need to answer that maybe.
Happy to take that for you.
Video. So yeah, AWS bare metal and VMware on Nutanix HCL. Right, can we license? Okay, the second part, VMware on Nutanix HCL, HCI. It's the same as VMware, exactly. AWS is different. So can we license individual VMs even if vMotion is enabled? Yes. Yeah, as long as you assign license with software assurance. Without software assurance, don't do that. If you have a license with software assurance, you still sort of assign them to the hardware, but how I do this in the tool? If a license is with SA and the Snow, I just tell Snow, assign that license to this virtual machine. You can do that. The only thing about Snow is Snow does not alert you when SA expires, and I don't know if there are any other tools that alert you that SA expires. I was told Flexera does. So when SA, you need to manually then recheck licenses every time when there's license assigned to a VM, you need to unassign it when the SA expires and it's not renewed, because then it becomes non-compliant. You can't do that. But otherwise, yes, you can license individual VMs, even if vMotion is enabled. Just use software license with active software assurance on those licenses. What are the conditions, limitations to use SQL Server license in cluster server pool environment? I'm not sure I understand the question. Cluster server pool. Well, if that was the question about virtual cluster with virtual machines moving with vMotion, I've just answered that. That's the condition. You need to have software assurance. What role does hardware asset management teams play in cost optimization? Huge role. So you need to talk to HAM teams because you will uncover skeletons in people's closets. So stuff like clusters are not really used properly. One production VM on a huge non-production cluster. So all those things, and then there'll be expiring hardware. There'll be questions around upgrades. Your HAM team need to be aware that if they increase the number of cores, prices may go up. So software asset management doesn't exist in the bubble. That's why recently many companies renamed we're still SAMexpert, renamed themselves into item something, because it becomes ITAM. It's always been ITAM. Hardware and software asset management going hand in hand. So huge role. They must be on board in such projects. Continue from the previous. When I say harm, it's with regards to forming a proactive approach to segregate the server info. I don't know what to say to this. Yes, I do support this. You need to segregate, and you need to talk to. Is it hardware team that actually controls what workload runs where, or is it software team, or is it application team, or is it DBA's database team? The best approach, by the way, to managing Wintel estate is, in my mind, is that creates sort of like compliance by design, is when you don't deploy a VM for an application. When you create some sort of cloud services inside the organization, that's when it's the best. So when you have a team that provides Windows Server as a service to all the other teams, say to the DBA team, and then the specific DBAs that provide database service to application teams. Application teams have no idea what that server is, where that's configured. They just provide requirements, and then DBAs configure that for them. And DBAs control licensing, DBAs control where it runs. And the application teams have no say about where that must be, in which cluster. In that case, you will create quite a compliant and quite a manageable team and process. It is something I can talk about for hours. I need to create probably a video about compliance by design. It becomes less important because of the cloud, though. That was just hello everyone. So, Jason, Microsoft has recently lost. Yes, it's not. It's difficult. So right now it's still going to be a direct bid for now. And then there's going to be like 3 to 5 years. They're going to reconsider, and then probably Trump will come back. Hopefully not. So, or maybe I don't know what your political alliances with whom they are, but we don't discuss this now. So things may change. So, but Microsoft, will they be very aggressive? Is a $10 billion deal that big for Microsoft? Probably. Will they become very aggressive in audits? Probably. No, I would say possibly. Possibly.
Yeah, they've been quiet for a while on the audit side. They've notched down their audit practice. We're seeing it. You told me that you're seeing it around the SPLA.
Yes, that's
agreement.
That's all the LCC is in SPLA now.
Yeah, but I think we're going to see it come up because you also mentioned that you're seeing a lot of Adobe audits.
Adobe is back. Adobe is back.
Adobe is back from what you mentioned.
Yeah, well, two of my customers received audit letters from Adobe.
So I think Microsoft, I actually agree with what Jason is saying. It's like, it's waves. It goes down and goes up, and it's been down for a while. If revenue starts to get tight from Microsoft side, I think that we can expect audits to come back. So it's always good to be prepared in general.
We have 2 minutes left. How SQL Server license work with the big data cluster for both SQL Server masters? Right. Not going to answer it today. I'm sorry. Big data cluster. Daryl, could you please write this down? Because it's an interesting one. I'm not sure this is going to make it to the training, but we'll see. This is a problem with quite a few SAM tools where addition is not picked. If you use agent-based tools, they may still not pick 1 or 2 or 3 instances. But usually, if they deploy agents, that's how this. They would usually pick the addition. If they query instances using WMI, they will not. So there you go. Right, that was hi everyone. By the way, hi. Sorry, I didn't say hi during the during the live. So Sam is asking, what SAM tool would you recommend for SQL Server installation inventory to help facilitate license positions? None. I mean, to 100% to say, this is a 100% working tool. None.
But what about map tool, just as a free tool? Wouldn't that be good enough?
Just for inventory, yes. Just for inventory, map, Snow, Flixera, Aspera, any tool that returns additions and visualization data is good. But to do a full licensing position in a tool, in my experience, it always requires human review.
Excel sheet at the end of the
day. Yeah. I mean, I'm a man that used to work with Snow a lot, and I'm not endorsing Snow anyhow. It's a good tool. I'm not endorsing it, and I had to do some stuff after Snow anyway. So Do you think database engine capacity limits like memory size really important time for SQL Server? I think personally, yes, but I've never managed to convince Microsoft. So I think if you have a node with 16 gig of RAM and you have 14 VMs, 16 VMs in the cluster, and each VM consumes 4 gig of RAM, you will never have 14 on one node. You will only have 4, the RAM limit. But Microsoft don't care. So my opinion is that it makes sense, but we can create a package and get addition. Yes, you can. That's what I said. You need to tune the CCM. I've only seen it once. Yes, you can. It's possible. Right. I've asked resell. Send me. We had this. So yes. Can you please list some of the prominent third-party applications?
Yeah, we talked about having a list on LinkedIn.
Can we use Power BI Server, Power BI just along with SQL Server Enterprise Edition license with the safe? Yeah, does it applicable both?
I would leave that. You're running over time, Alex. I want to be diligent on people's time.
I don't understand the question. I don't understand why not. Power BI Server. So the only thing with Power BI Server is that it may not be used in a third-party data center. Not sure about Azure. I think on Azure you can use it. Right. SQL Lines maybe. Okay, so you know what? I'm really sorry. I think I probably need to stop at this point. Daryl, can I? So, okay, Karen. Sorry for Karen. What was for Karen? Just quickly. Others components that. Good question. Thank you. For me, that's the best. Are there components that do not require server license, reporting, write time only, etc.? So, I have a video about this on this channel. So one warning, I forgot to tell about it. So when you count all the instances, or when you do the inventory, always count at least reporting, integration. What was the other one? It starts with A. SSIS. Can't remember right now. Anyway, treat every component as licensable, even if it's stored separately, unless you know for 100% it's free. And where do you find that? In the product terms, there's a list of additional software. So SQL Server Tools, which is called SQL Server Tools, is free. SQL Server Management Engine, Management Console, how it's called, SQL Server Management Studio, free. But reporting, integration, master data, all those things are licensable as full SQL Server instances. Don't forget about them. That's going to be about 20 to 30% of your SQL estate. Don't forget about them. It's going to be very painful if an auditor finds them. Yeah, I think I don't know, Daryl, what about you? But I like this question. What if you already paid for license and the covering is say only for enterprise? Do you still downgrade? Yeah, downgrade. You always no, you mean that. Then you need to assess the impact. If you're already paying for a say, that's why I say it maybe makes sense to wait until the enterprise agreement renewal, because even a full license with a say on standard will be cheaper than a say on enterprise. So depends on what your price level is, depends on what concessions you have. Microsoft may actually offer you concession on enterprise say, and then you can continue just having this. You can have that as a negotiating point, by the way. We don't want to downgrade. We want to continue running enterprise. Give us a discount. Make them more appealing to us. Otherwise, we'll downgrade. Yeah, that was okay. So almost the end. How SQL Server License work for Parallel? Not for today. PTW not for today, guys. Sorry, too complicated. And the only instances when I've seen Parallel Data Warehouse in SQL, that was an appliance, which was licensed as an appliance. Do we have a chance to upgrade SQL Server Business Intelligence Edition license with the site SQL Server Enterprise? Why is MS denying this? Okay, so with this question, yes, you may upgrade. With this question, please come to my, you connected to me on LinkedIn. Please come to my chat and let's chat about this, because this is bullshit. You may be able to upgrade. And I'll tell you where to find it in product list. Look for product list for that year when they stopped the BI edition. It's going to be there. The upgrade path. VS with MSDN is user-based license. How we can assign to this? So Visual Studio with MSDN is not assigned to licenses, to service. It's assigned to users, and then users have unlimited deployment rights. Doesn't matter where it runs, as long as all the other conditions of MSDN are met. Yeah, of course, you cannot assign MSDN subscriptions to production. You can only assign them to development and test and demonstration and design. MSDN subscription include all SQL Server edition. Yes, but the reason why I say use SQL Server Developer is they do include that, is because you, Robin, create a VM under your Visual Studio license, and then your admins in IT, they back it up. They deploy security patches onto that virtual machine. They all need another MSDN license, each of them, not just you, all of them. So you triple, you 10 times multiple. You may actually need 200 licenses suddenly. So I have customers where they actually decided to license non-production as production, because otherwise it will be, with their processor, will be just too expensive. That's why I say SQL Server Developer. Why would you deploy SQL Server Enterprise for non-production if SQL Server Developer is effectively SQL Server Enterprise? What's the reason? Let me know. License to different environment. This is not going to happen. I'm sorry, this is not going to happen. The MSDN level has to be enterprise to be able to cover the development service running productivity. So it doesn't use. I don't get this question. I'm sorry. I'll pass it on. Should assign to all users? Yes, correct. So that was the continuation of my previous comment. Flexera alerts when the stay is about to expire. That's what I heard from Flexera people. Never seen it myself. I'd like to see that. SCCM does it alert you? Okay, that it alerts it on the license. Does it say actually that license that you assigned to that server is about to expire? It's very important. SCCM does not always give full edition and struggles to, yes. It's just WMI does not return editions at all, ever. So, ever. Analysis service, thank you. Yes, SSAS analysis service, reporting services, integration services are licensable as full instances. Even if you don't have database services, I have a dedicated video. So that's it. Thanks, Helmut, as well. So, Daryl, it's up to you to choose whom you want to send your book to.
Well, I need to tell you, it's really difficult. There have been really incredible questions.
Fantastic questions.
This is...
Do you want to just quickly go through this?
Yeah, I want to go through the questions 1 second. It's really been amazing. The level of interaction is...
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful for...
has been fantastic. Can you just go down a second with the questions? I want to just see, there were a few questions. Can you scroll the questions?
Can you scroll? Just I can even put them on screen. Can I? No, I cannot. Why can I not put them on screen? Oh no, that's strange. Can you not see the questions?
I can only see a few of them, and there was a name that I didn't write down that I just wanted to see if I can recognize.
What was the question? Do I see as I'm scrolling right now? Do you see me scrolling or?
No, I don't see you scrolling. So I missed that. I was going to write down the name. Let's see. No, can you go through them quickly for me? Nope. Just.
What was the question about?
You'll go on. I'll recognize it when I see it.
Yeah, sorry. Please stay with us. We're going to pick the winner in a few.
Yeah, stop here. In general, I really love the questions from, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Jitendra, if I'm getting it right. A lot of excellent questions, a lot of insight. So from my perspective, Jitendra Desal is my winner for today.
Okay, so please send me your physical postal address to my direct messages on LinkedIn, and I'll forward that to Daryl, and then we'll arrange the book to be sent to you.
It'll be my pleasure.
Everybody, thanks very much. Thank you for being with us. I'm sorry if you haven't got the book, but there'll be a new edition. We don't know when. This year, maybe beginning of next, hopefully this year, which will be updated. It's going to be available soon. So yeah, please stay in touch. Please stay tuned. Please come to another live like this in a couple of weeks on Wednesday, and then the next live after that will be the beginning of the free training. And then next Monday, 10 o'clock London time, I moved them to 10 o'clock. So Monday morning, Microsoft, I'm going to be talking about Microsoft 365 from SA licensing traps. So if you're interested, please come to that one.
Alex, it's been amazing. Very, very informative. I learned a lot from the session. Thank you for having me join you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
What an incredible audience today. Really incredible.
Fantastic.
What a pleasure.
Yeah. Goodbye. Have a great day and save with knowledge of licensing. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.